The sun was just beginning to rise over the skyline of Los Angeles, casting long golden shadows across the pavement. In a wealthy part of the city, known for its high-end boutiques and expensive tastes, stood a car dealership that looked less like a shop and more like a museum. The showroom floor was made of flawless white marble, polished so brightly that one could see their reflection in the stone. The air inside was cool and smelled faintly of expensive leather and rich coffee. It was a place designed for one thing: to separate the very rich from their money in exchange for beautiful, fast machines. Inside, the staff was already moving around, preparing for the day. They wore sharp suits that probably cost more than an average person's monthly rent. The men adjusted their ties in the reflection of the car hoods, and the women checked their makeup in compact mirrors. They were not just salespeople. They were hunters. They waited for the whales, the customers who would walk in, and write a check for a sports car without even asking about the gas mileage. They were trained to spot money from a mile away. They looked at shoes, watches, and the cut of clothing. If you didn't look like you had a black card in your pocket, you were invisible to them. Just as the team was finishing their morning coffee meeting, the automatic glass doors at the front of the showroom slid open. A soft chime rang out, announcing a new arrival. Every head turned, expecting a celebrity or a tech mogul. Instead, they saw a man who looked like he had just woken up under a bridge. It was Keanu Reeves. To the people in that room, he didn't look like a movie star. He didn't have an entourage. He wasn't wearing sunglasses to hide his face, and he certainly wasn't dressed in designer clothes. He walked in with a slow, relaxed stride, wearing a well-worn baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. His t-shirt was a simple, faded, dark color, and his jeans looked old and comfortable, the kind with frayed hems that have been walked on for years. On his feet, he wore a pair of heavy, scuffed boots that looked like they had seen miles of city sidewalks. He carried a small, heavy-looking backpack over one shoulder. He didn't walk with the arrogance of a rich man. He walked with the quiet confidence of someone who is comfortable in his own skin. Regardless of where he is, the head of the sales team, a man with a perfectly trimmed beard and a suit that fit like a glove, watched the newcomer enter. His eyes narrowed. He saw the worn boots first, then the messy hair sticking out from under the cap. He let out a quiet, almost silent sigh of annoyance. To him, this man wasn't a customer. This man was a distraction. He looked like a tourist who had wandered in to use the bathroom or take a selfie with a card he couldn't afford. Keanu didn't seem to notice the judgment in the air. He stood just inside the door for a moment, looking around the massive room. His eyes moved slowly, taking in the gleaming metal and glass. There was no greed in his face, only a quiet appreciation. He loved cars. He loved the way they were built, the power inside them, the engineering that made them go fast. He wasn't there to be seen. He was there because he genuinely loved machines. He walked past the front desk where the receptionist sat. The staff watched him like hawks, waiting to see if he would touch something. The manager gave a subtle signal to a younger salesperson, a tall guy with a fake smile, to go intercept him. The idea wasn't to help him buy a car. It was to steer him away from the expensive inventory before he wasted everyone's time, but Keanu didn't go toward the desk. He turned to the left, heading straight for a section of the showroom that held the most powerful cars. His boots made a soft, thudding sound on the marble, a sound that seemed out of place in the silent, pristine room. He stopped in front of a sleek, low-slung sports car. It was painted a deep, aggressive red. It looked like it was moving even when it was standing still. Keanu stood there, perfectly still. He tilted his head to the side, looking at the curve of the wheel well. He reached out a hand, his fingers rough and work-worn, and gently touched the cool metal of the car's roof. He didn't scratch it. He just rested his hand there, feeling the connection between the man and the machine from across the room. The manager watched this interaction with a growing sense of irritation. He saw the backpack drop to the floor. He saw the worn jeans crouch down as Keanu bent to look at the car's tires. The manager shook his head slightly. He had seen this 1,000 times. People came in to dream. They touched the cars, sat in the seats, made engine noises with their mouths, and then left without buying a hubcap. In his mind, this guy was the worst kind of browser one who didn't even have the decency to dress up a little bit. While pretending he could afford the lifestyle, the atmosphere in the showroom shifted. The friendly, professional mask the sales team wore for real customers slipped. They went back to checking their phones and shuffling papers, deliberately ignoring the man in the corner. They didn't offer him water. They didn't offer a greeting. They treated him like he was part of the furniture, or maybe a piece of dust that had floated in from the street, but Keanu remained oblivious to the coldness. He was in his own world. He moved from the red car to a silver one next to it. He read the specifications on the little placard next to the wheel with intense focus. He nodded slightly to himself as if agreeing with what the engineers had decided. He wasn't pretending to understand the car. He actually did understand it. He knew about horsepower, torque, and suspension. He respected the craft. He ran a hand along the side of the silver car, feeling the aerodynamics. A small, genuine smile appeared on his face. It was the kind of smile that comes from pure joy, the joy a child feels when they see a toy they love, but tempered by the wisdom of an adult. He looked happy. The manager, however, was not happy. He saw the smile and interpreted it differently. He thought it was the look of someone mocking them. He saw a guy with a beat-up backpack smiling at a $250,000 car, and it felt like an insult to the dealership. It felt like a joke. The manager's patience, which was already thin, snapped. He decided that enough was enough. He couldn't have this guy wandering around all day, potentially scaring off actual wealthy customers who might walk in. He smoothed the lapels of his jacket, putting on his I-am-in-charge face, and began to walk across the marble floor. His footsteps were sharp and loud, commanding attention. As he walked, the other salespeople perked up, sensing that something was about to happen. They watched with anticipation, knowing their boss was about to kick the bum out, Keanu. Still looking at the engine of the silver car through the glass cover, didn't hear the footsteps approaching. He was focused on the beauty of the engine block, the way the hoses were routed, the perfection of the metal. For a moment, he was just a car guy admiring a masterpiece. But the moment was about to end. The heavy silence of the showroom was about to be broken by the harsh voice of judgment. The manager was now standing just a few feet away, his shadow falling over Keanu and the car. The contrast between the two men was stark. One was polished, expensive, and angry. The other was rough, simple, and peaceful. The manager cleared his throat loudly, the sound echoing in the large room, demanding attention. Keanu slowly stood up straight, adjusting his cap, and turned to face the man in the suit. The air between them crackled with tension, though only one of them knew why. This was the moment the mistake began. The heavy sound of the manager clearing his throat hung in the air like smoke. It was a rude, sharp noise meant to grab attention and establish dominance. Keanu pulled his hand back from the silver car and turned around slowly. He didn't look annoyed or startled. He looked ready to have a conversation. He adjusted the strap of his backpack, offering a polite nod to the man in the expensive suit. The manager did not nod back. He stood with his feet wide apart, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. He was a man who believed he was the gatekeeper of this world, and he took his job very seriously. He looked Keanu up and down, his eyes lingering on the worn boots and the faded jeans. There was no smile on his face, only a look of cold calculation. "Can I help you?" the manager asked. His voice was loud enough for the other salespeople to hear. He didn't say it like a question. He said it like a warning. The tone suggested, "Why are you here, and when are you leaving?" Keanu, oblivious to the hostility, smiled slightly. He pointed a thumb back at the silver sports car. "Yeah, actually. I was looking at the suspension geometry on this one. The brochure says it has the adaptive damping system, but the clearance looks a bit lower than the last model. Do you know if they changed the linkage in the rear?" The question was specific. It was technical. It was the kind of question a real mechanic or a true car enthusiast would ask. But the manager didn't care about the answer, and he certainly didn't think this scruffy man understood the words coming out of his own mouth. The manager let out a short, dismissive laugh. It was a sound designed to make Keanu feel small. Suspension geometry? The manager repeated, mocking the words. He looked over at the other staff members, and a few of them smirked back at him. They were enjoying the show. Look, friend, this isn't a garage. This is a showroom for high-performance vehicles. These cars are built for the track, not for whatever it is you're looking for. Keanu blinked, his expression neutral. He wasn't trying to argue. He just wanted to know about the car. Right, Keanu said calmly. I know it's a showroom. I was just asking because I'm interested in the way it handles. The manager took a step closer, invading Keanu's personal space. He wanted to use his height and his expensive suit to tower over the customer. Interested in how it handles? He sneered. Let's be honest here. You look like you've been riding a bicycle everywhere. These cars cost more than most people make in a decade. They are not for curiosity seekers. The cruelty in his voice was palpable. He wasn't just rejecting a customer. He was trying to humiliate a human being. The other salespeople stopped pretending to work. They leaned against their desks, watching the scene unfold with amusement. To them, this was the entertainment for the morning. They saw a guy who didn't fit in getting put in his place by the boss. Keanu stood his ground, but his posture relaxed even more. He was used to people judging him. He had spent decades in the public eye, and he knew better than anyone that clothes and money didn't make the man. He looked the manager in the eye, his gaze steady and kind. I understand the price, Keanu said softly. I've been driving for a long time. I just appreciate the engineering. The manager shook his head. He had heard enough. He didn't want to hear about appreciation. He wanted to protect the inventory. He waved a hand in the air as if he was shooing away a fly. Appreciation doesn't pay the bills. Look, I'm going to be straight with you because I don't want to waste your time, and I certainly don't want to waste mine. This floor is for qualified buyers only. People who come in here with a pre-approved loan or a checkbook. He gestured vaguely toward the door. If you want to look at cars, there's a convenience store down the street with a magazine rack. I'm sure they have pictures of these cars you can look at for free. A quiet laugh rippled through the group of salespeople in the back. It was a cruel sound, the laugh of people who think they are better than someone else. But Keanu didn't blush. He didn't get angry. He didn't even look embarrassed. He just looked at the manager with a sense of pity. It was as if he felt sorry for the manager that he had to treat people this way to feel important. That's unfortunate, Keanu said simply. I really was serious about the car. Keanu turned his back to the manager and looked at the red sports car again. He wanted to take one last look at the lines of the vehicle before he left. But the manager wasn't done. He wasn't satisfied with just verbal abuse. He wanted to exert physical control over the situation. He stepped in front of Keanu, blocking his view of the cars entirely. I said no, the manager snapped, his voice dropping an octave, becoming dangerous. You don't touch the cars? You don't look at the cars. You're getting grease on your jeans, and I don't want that near the leather seats. You need to leave, now. He pointed a finger toward the glass exit doors. We have clients coming in, important clients who don't want to see someone like you lurking around. It makes the place look bad. Go. Keanu looked at the finger pointing at the door, then back at the manager's angry face. For a split second, the showroom was completely silent. The air conditioning hummed, but no one spoke. The staff members held their breath, waiting to see if the bum would cause a scene. They were ready to call security if things got ugly. But Keanu just sighed. It was a heavy, disappointed sigh. He reached into his pocket, and for a moment the manager flinched, thinking Keanu might be pulling out a weapon or something aggressive. But Keanu only pulled out a folded piece of paper. A note he had written to himself about the car specs and put it back into his jeans. You have a beautiful showroom, Keanu said, his voice polite and sincere despite the way he was being treated. It's a shame about the service. He turned and began to walk toward the door. The manager watched him go, puffing out his chest, feeling victorious. He had successfully protected the fortress from the intruder. He turned back to his staff, a smirk plastered on his face. "See?" the manager said loudly to his team. "That's how you handle it. You can't let this place turn into a circus. If they look like they can't afford the floor mats, they don't belong here." The salespeople laughed and nodded, agreeing with him. They went back to their coffee and their phones, feeling superior. They didn't know that the man walking away from them owned a collection of motorcycles worth more than the entire building. They didn't know he could have bought every car on the floor with a single check. As Keanu reached the glass doors, he paused for a moment. He looked at his reflection in the glass. He saw the tired eyes under the baseball cap. He straightened his shirt and pushed the door open. The bell chimed again, a soft, cheerful sound that mocked the ugliness that had just happened inside. Outside, the sun was brighter. The air was fresh. Keanu took a deep breath, letting the hostility of the showroom roll off his back like water off a duck's back. He didn't look back in anger. He just looked forward. He adjusted his backpack and began to walk down the street, his hands in his pockets, moving with the same easy rhythm as before. Inside, the staff continued to joke, completely unaware that they had just made the biggest mistake of their careers. They had judged a book by its cover, and in doing so, they had lost a story that would have made them legends in the industry. Instead, they were left with just another empty morning and a boss who thought he was the king of the world. The glass doors slid shut behind Keanu, sealing off the cool, air-conditioned world of marble and arrogance from the heat of the Los Angeles morning. Outside, the city was waking up. Cars zoomed by on the street, and the sun was beating down on the pavement. Keanu stood on the sidewalk for a moment, adjusting his backpack. He didn't look angry. He didn't look back at the dealership with a scowl. Instead, he just looked thoughtful, as if he was trying to solve a puzzle in his head. He took a deep breath of the fresh air, which smelled of exhaust and street food, a sharp contrast to the smell of expensive leather and cologne he had just left. He pulled his phone out of his pocket. It was an old model, the screen slightly cracked, but it worked. He scrolled through a few numbers, his thumb hovering over the screen. He had planned to buy that car today. It was supposed to be a gift for himself, a reward for months of hard work on a new film set. He had the money ready in his account. But the vibe inside the showroom had been so toxic, so filled with judgment, that the excitement of buying a new toy had evaporated. Keanu wasn't the kind of person to beg to spend his money. He believed that if someone didn't want his business, he would take it elsewhere. He put the phone back in his pocket without making a call. He decided he would just walk for a while. He enjoyed walking. It cleared his head. He stuck his hands in his jeans pockets and started walking down the street, his boots scuffing the sidewalk, heading toward a diner a few blocks away where he knew the coffee was cheap and the servers were nice inside the showroom. The mood was completely different. The silence that had fallen when Keanu left was broken by the sound of laughter. The manager stood in the middle of the floor, his chest puffed out like a rooster who had just won a fight. He looked around at his team, a wide smirk on his face. "Did you see his face?" the manager asked, chuckling. "He actually thought I was going to discuss suspension geometry with him. Unbelievable." The other salespeople laughed along with him, though some of their laughs were a little nervous. They were used to the manager's moods, and they knew that agreeing with him was the safest way to get through the day. One young salesman, eager to impress the boss, stepped forward. "You handled that perfectly, sir," the young man said. "We can't have people like that in here. It lowers the tone of the place. Real clients want to feel exclusive. They don't want to rub shoulders with, well, you know." The manager nodded sagely, happy that his lesson was being learned. "Exactly. This is a luxury brand. We are selling a dream. We are selling a lifestyle. You can't sell a dream to someone who looks like a nightmare." If I had let him stay, he would have scared off the actual customers. He probably would have scratched the paint with his cheap belt buckle. He walked over to the silver sports car that Keanu had been looking at. The manager pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and aggressively wiped the spot on the roof where Keanu had rested his hand. He scrubbed it hard as if trying to erase the very memory of the touch. "Clean this up," he barked at a porter who was passing by with a vacuum. "Make sure there are no fingerprints. I don't know where his hands have been." The staff went back to work, energized by the drama. They felt important. They felt like guardians of a secret temple. They straightened their ties and made sure their suits were perfect, waiting for the right kind of person to walk in. They were convinced they had dodged a bullet. They thought they had saved the dealership from a waste of time, but while they were busy patting themselves on the back, the phone on the receptionist's desk began to ring. It was a sharp, insistent ring that cut through the chatter. The receptionist, a woman with perfect hair and a bored expression, picked up the receiver. "Sunset Motors, how can I direct your call?" She sang in a sweet voice. She listened for a moment, her finger absent-mindedly twirling a strand of hair. Then her expression changed. Her back straightened. She looked toward the manager's office, her eyes wide. "Yes, sir. He's right here. Just one moment." She covered the mouthpiece with her hand and looked across the room at the manager. "Sir, it's the owner. He says it's urgent." The manager's smirk faltered for a split second. The owner rarely called the showroom floor directly unless something was wrong. The manager smoothed his jacket and walked quickly to the desk, taking the phone from the receptionist. He put on his most professional voice, the one he used for VIPs. "This is the manager." "Good morning, sir. How can I help you?" The voice on the other end of the line was frantic. It was the owner, a man who usually spoke slowly and calmly. Now he was talking so fast that the manager could barely keep up. "Did you just kick a man out of the showroom?" The owner shouted, his voice tinny through the phone. "A man in a baseball cap? A gray t-shirt? Backpack?" The manager froze. He felt a cold drop of sweat roll down his spine. He looked around the showroom. Everyone was watching him. He turned his back to them, lowering his voice. "Well, yes, sir. As a matter of fact, I did." He was loitering. He looked like he looked homeless. He was touching the cars. He wasn't a buyer. I was protecting the inventory. There was a long, terrible silence on the line. Then the owner spoke again, his voice trembling with a mix of rage and terror. "You idiot," the owner whispered. "That wasn't a homeless guy. That was Keanu Reeves. He called my personal cell phone 2 minutes ago. He was on his way here to buy 2 cars today. Cash, he wanted to surprise a friend for a birthday. He was waiting for me to come out and meet him, and you just threw him onto the sidewalk." The manager stood frozen, his mouth hanging open slightly. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The blood drained from his face, making him look pale and sickly. His grip on the phone tightened until his knuckles turned white. "Keanu Reeves?" the manager stuttered, his voice barely a whisper. "The actor? The guy from the action movies?" "Yes!" the owner screamed. "The guy who has more money in his bank account than this entire dealership is worth. He told me you humiliated him. He told me you laughed at him. He is currently walking down the street, and if we don't fix this, he is going to buy his cars from our competitor, and he is going to tell the whole world how we treat our customers." The manager's heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. He looked at the silver car, then at the door, then at his staff who were smiling and joking, completely unaware of the catastrophe that had just occurred. The mistake hit him like a physical blow. He hadn't just been rude to a customer. He had sabotaged the business. He had insulted one of the most famous and beloved actors in the world, a man known for being kind and humble. "Where is he?" the manager asked, his voice shaking. "I'll go get him. I'll bring him back." "He's gone," the owner said, his voice filled with defeat. "He said he's done. He said he's going to the motorcycle shop down the road because they actually treat people with respect. You need to clear out your desk. You're done here." The line went dead. The manager stood there holding the phone, the dial tone buzzing in his ear like a hive of angry bees. He stared at the glass doors. Outside, the street was busy. Somewhere out there, walking away, was the man he had made fun of. The man he had judged by his boots. The man who could have bought the entire showroom without blinking. The manager slowly placed the phone back on the receiver. The sound of the click echoed in the sudden silence of the room. He turned around to face his team. They were still smiling, waiting for him to tell them what the owner wanted. They were expecting praise. They had no idea that the walls of their perfect little world were about to come crashing down. The big mistake was no longer just a bad moment. It was a reality that was about to destroy them. The buzzing sound of the dial tone seemed to grow louder, echoing in the manager's ear like a swarm of angry bees. He couldn't move his hand to hang up the receiver. His fingers were frozen, gripping the plastic handle until his knuckles turned white. It felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. 1 minute ago, he was the king of the castle, the man who protected the valuable inventory from the undesirables of the world. Now he was nothing more than a failure. The air in the showroom, which usually smelled of rich coffee and expensive polish, suddenly felt heavy and suffocating. The manager took a shaky breath, his heart hammering against his ribs so hard he could hear it thumping in his ears. He stared blankly at the glossy black surface of the receptionist's desk. His mind was racing, trying to catch up with the reality of what had just happened. The words of the owner played over and over in his head. Asterisk, that was Keanu Reeves. He was going to buy 2 cars. Cash. Asterisk. The manager squeezed his eyes shut, trying to banish the memory of the last 20 minutes, but it came flooding back with painful clarity. He saw the man in the baseball cap standing by the silver car. He saw the worn boots and the faded jeans. He heard his own voice, dripping with arrogance, mocking the man's questions. He remembered the cruel jokes about the bicycle, the comment about the magazine rack, and the way he had physically pointed to the door as if he was kicking out a stray dog. A wave of nausea rolled through the manager's stomach. He had spent his entire life working in sales, climbing the ladder from a lot attendant to the manager of the most prestigious dealership in the city. He had one rule: judge the book by its cover. If you look rich, treat them like gold. If you look poor, show them the door. It was a rule that had worked for him for 10 years. And in 5 minutes it had destroyed his career. The receptionist was watching him with wide, nervous eyes. She had never seen her boss look like this. He was usually so confident, so in control. Now he looked pale and sickly, like a man who had just received a terminal diagnosis. "Sir?" she whispered, leaning across the desk. "Is everything okay? What did Mr. Sterling say?" The manager opened his mouth, but no words came out. He looked past her toward the showroom floor. The rest of the staff was watching him too. The young salesman who had praised him for kicking Keanu out was standing by the red sports car, looking confused. The smirk was gone from his face, replaced by a look of unease. They were all waiting for an explanation, waiting for the nod that would tell them everything was fine and they could go back to selling, but there would be no nod. Everything was not fine. The manager finally found the strength to move. He slowly placed the phone back onto the cradle. The click sounded like a gunshot in the silent room. He turned away from the desk and walked unsteadily toward the middle of the floor. His legs felt heavy, like he was walking through deep mud. He stopped in the exact same spot where Keanu had been standing just a few minutes ago. He looked down at the pristine marble floor. It looked empty now. He was real, the manager mumbled to himself. It was barely a whisper. "Who was real, boss?" the young salesman asked, stepping closer. He was trying to sound casual, but there was a tremor in his voice. The manager looked up. His eyes were bloodshot and filled with a mix of terror and regret. He looked at his team, the people he had trained, the people he had taught to be just as judgmental as he was. He felt a deep sense of shame. He had led them into this disaster. "That man?" the manager said, his voice cracking. "The guy in the cap. The one we just threw out. What about him?" Another salesperson asked from the back of the room. "Did he steal something?" "No," the manager said, letting out a long, shaky breath. "He didn't steal anything. He was a customer. He was Keanu Reeves." The silence that followed was absolute. It was so quiet you could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the break room down the hall. The young salesman's jaw dropped open. The receptionist gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. They all just stared at the manager, their eyes wide with disbelief. "You're joking?" the young salesman said, forcing a nervous laugh. "Keanu Reeves? The actor? The guy who makes all those movies? That wasn't him. That guy looked like a construction worker." "That was him," the manager said, his voice stronger now, filled with the weight of his guilt. "The owner just called me." He called the owner from his cell phone while he was walking away. He was coming here to buy cars. 2 of them. He was going to pay cash. And we humiliated him. The color drained from the faces of the entire staff. The reality began to sink in. They looked around the showroom at the empty spaces where the man had stood. Suddenly, the bum they had mocked became a legend in their minds. They replayed the interaction in their heads, but this time they saw it through a different lens. They saw a humble, polite man asking a genuine question, and they saw themselves acting like cruel schoolyard bullies. I told him to go to a convenience store," the young salesman whispered, horrified. "I told you he was lowering the tone of the place." The manager nodded slowly. "We all did. We were so busy looking at his clothes that we forgot to look at the human being inside them. We treated a multimillionaire like a criminal because he wasn't wearing a suit." Panic started to set in. The manager ran to the floor-to-ceiling glass windows at the front of the showroom. He pressed his hands against the glass, looking out onto the busy street. The sun was high now, the pavement shimmering with heat. He searched the crowds of people walking by. He looked for a baseball cap. He looked for a backpack. He looked for any sign of the man he had so carelessly discarded. "He can't have gone far," the manager said, more to himself than to the others. "Maybe I can catch him. Maybe I can apologize. If I bring him back, maybe the owner won't fire me." He grabbed the handle of the glass door, ready to run out into the street. But he stopped. His hand hovered over the handle. He watched the endless stream of traffic. He watched the people rushing to work, the tourists taking photos, the buses stopping and starting. The city was enormous. It was a sea of millions of people. Keanu was gone. He had disappeared into the city, and the manager had no idea where he went. He could be anywhere. He could be miles away by now. And even if the manager did find him, what would he say? "Sorry I insulted you. Please come back and give me your commission." The thought made him feel sick. The manager let go of the door handle and leaned his forehead against the cool glass. He closed his eyes. He realized with a sinking heart that it was too late. The moment had passed. The opportunity was gone. And it wasn't just about the money or the cars. It was about the way he had treated another human being. He turned away from the window and looked back at the showroom. It looked different now. It didn't look like a palace of success anymore. It looked like a hollow, shiny shell. The cars were just chunks of metal. The marble was just cold stone. The soul of the place had been ripped out when they kicked Keanu Reeves out the door. The staff stood frozen in their spots, looking at the manager, then at each other. No one knew what to do. No one dared to move. They were all waiting for the axe to fall. They knew they were part of this mistake. They had all laughed. They had all judged. "He's going to fire us all," the receptionist said quietly from the desk. "Isn't he?" The manager didn't answer. He walked slowly over to the silver sports car. He looked at the spot on the roof where Keanu had rested his hand. The manager took his handkerchief out of his pocket again, but this time he didn't wipe the spot. He just stood there, feeling the crushing weight of his own arrogance. He realized that in trying to protect the dealership from someone who didn't belong, he had shown that he was the one who didn't belong. He had failed the ultimate test of character. He had kicked a hero out of his building, and now he had to live with the fact that he was the villain in the story. The silence inside the showroom was no longer peaceful. It was heavy and suffocating, like the air before a thunderstorm. The manager stood motionless in the center of the marble floor, his eyes fixed on the glass doors, but his mind was miles away. The reality of his situation was settling in, layer by heavy layer. He wasn't just going to lose a bonus. He was going to lose his career. In the high-stakes world of luxury sales, reputation was everything. Once the story got out, and he knew it would get out, that he had kicked one of the biggest movie stars in the world out of his own dealership. No other owner in the city would touch him. He was poisoned. The rest of the staff moved like ghosts. They didn't speak. They didn't look at each other. They shuffled papers and adjusted displays with trembling hands, terrified that the wrong movement might draw the manager's attention, or worse, the attention of the owner who was surely on his way. The young salesman who had praised the manager earlier felt sick to his stomach. He leaned against a wall, replaying the moment in his head where he had laughed at Keanu Reeves. He felt a burning sense of shame. He realized that he had bullied a good man just to impress a boss who was now falling apart right in front of him. Suddenly, the sound of a car engine roared outside, too close to the building. Tires screeched against the pavement. Heads snapped up. The staff watched as a black luxury sedan swerved into the driveway and came to an abrupt halt right in front of the glass doors. It blocked the entrance completely. The driver's door flew open, and the owner of the dealership stepped out. He didn't look like his usual calm, composed self. His face was red, his tie was loose, and he was holding a phone in his hand as if he wanted to throw it. He stormed toward the glass doors, and the automatic sensor seemed too slow to react to his urgency. He pushed the doors open with such force that they banged against the stops, echoing through the silent showroom like a gunshot. The owner marched straight to the center of the room. He didn't look at the cars. He didn't look at the sales staff. He locked eyes with the manager. "Tell me it isn't true," the owner said, his voice low and dangerous. "Tell me my phone is broken and that you didn't just throw away the biggest sale of the year." The manager swallowed hard, his throat clicking in the quiet room. He couldn't lie. There was no point? I didn't know who he was," he stammered. He looked like a vagrant. He was wearing old clothes. "I thought he was wasting our time." The owner stared at him, his eyes wide with disbelief. "You thought he was wasting your time? That man is a legend. He is a gentleman. He was ready to write a check for 2 vehicles today, and you insulted him. You kicked him out?" The owner's voice began to rise, echoing off the high ceiling. "I don't pay you to judge people's clothes. I pay you to sell cars. You had a movie star standing right here, and you were too blind to see it because you were staring at his boots." The manager hung his head. He wanted to explain, to defend his logic about qualified buyers, but the words died in his throat. It sounded pathetic now. It sounded like the excuse of a small, petty man. "Get your things," the owner said, his voice suddenly dropping to a cold, flat tone. It was scarier than the shouting. "Clear out your desk. You're done? I want you out of this building in 10 minutes. The manager didn't argue. He didn't beg. He knew it was over. He nodded slowly, turned on his heel, and walked toward the back office. As he walked, the staff watched him go. No one looked sorry for him. They were just relieved it wasn't them. A few minutes later, the manager walked back out of the office carrying a small cardboard box. It contained a few framed photos of his family, a coffee mug, and a plant. It was amazing how 20 years of a career could be reduced to a single small box. He walked toward the glass doors, keeping his eyes down. He didn't say goodbye to anyone. He pushed the door open and stepped out into the bright sunlight. He stood on the sidewalk, blinking in the harsh light. He looked up and down the street, half hoping to see Keanu Reeves walking back, maybe to give him a second chance. But the street was full of strangers. The city was moving on, indifferent to his misery. He had let the most important customer of his life walk away, and now he was just another unemployed man in a suit on the sidewalk. He climbed into his car and drove away, the weight of his mistake sitting heavier than the cardboard box in the passenger seat. Meanwhile, a few blocks away, the atmosphere was completely different. Keanu Reeves was standing on the corner of a busy intersection, waiting for the light to change. The backpack was still slung over his shoulder. He didn't look angry or upset. He actually looked a little hungry. He spotted a small, authentic taco truck parked on the side of the road and smiled. He walked over and joined the line of construction workers and delivery drivers, He ordered a simple meal and stood to the side while he waited. He chatted with an older woman next to him about the weather. He smiled at a child who was pointing at him. He was just Keanu, a regular guy enjoying his day. The toxic energy of the dealership had washed off him the moment he walked out the door. He didn't hold grudges. He knew that life was too short to worry about people who measured the worth of a human being by the price of their shoes. While he was eating his taco, a sleek black sedan pulled up to the curb. The window rolled down and a friend of his, a fellow actor, leaned out. "Hey, hop in," the friend called out with a laugh. "I thought you were going to buy that car today." Keanu finished his bite, wiped his mouth with a napkin, and tossed his trash in a bin. He walked over to the car and tossed his backpack into the back seat before sliding into the front. "Yeah, about that," Keanu said, a small, mischievous grin playing on his lips. "I'd changed my mind. The place was nice, but the service was terrible. The manager didn't really seem to like my boots." His friend laughed, shaking his head. "You're kidding. Did they not know who you were?" "I don't think they cared," Keanu said softly, leaning back against the leather seat. "They saw what they wanted to see. It happens. It's not worth getting upset about. There are plenty of other cars in the world." The car pulled away from the curb and merged into the traffic. As they drove, Keanu looked out the window. They passed the motorcycle shop the owner of the dealership had mentioned on the phone. Keanu gazed at the bikes parked out front with a thoughtful expression. "You know," Keanu said, "I think I might just buy a motorcycle instead. It feels more real. Plus, the guys at the shop usually just want to talk about engines, not suits." Back at the showroom, the sun was beginning to set. The owner was sitting in his office, staring out the window. The cars were gleaming under the spotlights, ready to be bought. But the showroom felt empty. It was missing a soul. The staff lingered, closing up for the day, moving quietly. They didn't joke or brag anymore. They realized that they had been given a test today, and they had failed spectacularly. They had chased away a good man because they were too arrogant to look past a worn-out pair of jeans. The big mistake wasn't just about losing money. It was about the realization that kindness is more valuable than status. The dealership had everything money could buy, but they had lost the one thing money couldn't buy: respect. And as Keanu rode off toward the sunset, free and happy, the sales team was left behind to sweep the floors of their empty palace, learning the hard way that you should never judge a book or a customer by its cover.